One moment. Happy New Year, everyone. Welcome to the Life with Joey Calvo podcast. I'm Joey Calvo. Today I have Diamond Dragons, otherwise known as Matthew Carauddo. He is a former actor, director, and stage combat artist for 30 years and a licensed fencing instructor for 15. He is the creator, author, designer, main illustrator, and primary voiceover artist for Diamond Dragons. Previously known as Nova Star in the Star Wars lightsaber community, Matthew has 15 years of experience in fencing, stage combat, and martial arts. Wing Chun Kung Fu, Jiu-Jitsu, Shotokan Karate, Jeet Kune Do, Tricking. He's also a licensed fencing instructor, approved and examined by the Francois.
Well, I used to be.
Okay. From the French Federation d'Escrime.
Right, yeah, it's just basically French for the Federation of Fencing Instructors. It's hard to explain because, of course, that was in France. But we don't have to get into that unless people have any questions, or you do, or whatnot. But yeah, there's quite a bit of things that I've done in my past that also kind of relate and work into the whole idea of storytelling and production and whatnot.
Okay, so welcome to the podcast. First of all,
thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So Diamond Dragons. Well, before we get to Diamond Dragons, tell us more about you outside of what I just said.
Outside of that, I don't. And thank you for the introduction. I mean, I think a lot of that is just kind of like people can visit the website to learn more about, my previous work, I suppose is a good way of putting it, instead of maybe boring them with all the different details. But if you have any specific questions, feel free to ask. But yeah, to kind of give the overall view, my background is in production. And what I mean by that is things like acting, which mostly was live on stage for most of the work that I did. But I did some, work for like videos, productions and film or whatever, very, very basic level stuff. Certainly nothing in, Hollywood and big time, flashy stuff. But I mean, as people are probably aware, there's more to actors and directors of productions than there, just Hollywood. I mean, there's all sorts of projects out there, even video games. People can be a video game director and you almost never hear of them, until maybe 30 years later, and if the game became popular. But certainly there are, actors out there that they only do theater and they're not well known other than their community, and so on and so forth. So that's a huge portion of my background. However, another part of my background was I always loved martial arts, as a young man and whatnot, and certainly seeing films with Bruce Lee, Jean-Claude Van Damme, and Jet Li and Jackie Chan and all these things. I mean, it's not the only ones, obviously, but when I was younger, I was like, I want to take some martial arts classes, see if it's something that I would both enjoy and be good at. And I found that not only did I really enjoy it, but that I was tough enough to handle the rigor of those disciplines, which I'm not a super big, tough. I'm not Arnold Schwarzenegger going, I'm gonna kill you, But I mean, I quickly realized, hey, I could, if you train well, you take a punch, you take a kick, you do some, some work on your fists. Like we would be punching these really hard. It's really hard to explain to people because it wasn't just bags. We would work on something called the mukyan chong, and that's just a Chinese expression for wooden dummy. And there's basically two arms sticking out. I mean, they're not arms; they're just wooden posts, and then sort of a bent kneed leg looking thing, which again, it's not a real leg, but it's a sort of a tree branch thing. And you're there smashing your shins against the tree branch, and you're striking your forearms and wrist areas, all this stuff in your fist onto the wood, and you're doing all these, actions and whatnot. And it's not only to show you different blocks, like how to shift your stance to stopping actions from coming in. As you'll probably be aware, if you've watched any martial arts films, you'd be like, yeah, they do kind of have this kind of all these weird kind of shifty moves that are very snake-like. Those are realistic in terms of stopping actions coming in. just like boxers have to sometimes slip a punch or whatever. But anyway, I'm making it laborious here, but the idea is, yeah, we would train on those things, and you just come out with these just thick bruises, and they turn all sorts of wonderful colors. I used to joke with my friends, be like, "Hey, what color are bruises going to be today?" And so yeah, that was a thing, and then I moved. That was basically Wing Chun Kung Fu. With that is what that was from, and people might be most familiar with the whole Wing Chun via the movies that Donnie Yen did, which was the titles of Ip Man, just IP Man, and it wasn't like Ip Man like Superman, but that was just his name, Ip Man. And ironically, my instructor trained under an instructor named Ben Dur, and Ben Dur trained under Ip Man. So it's kind of an interesting thing, because Ip Man was a real person. He was not a fictional human being. Now, of course, Donnie Yen as Ip Man and all the movies, it's greatly exaggerated for obvious reasons. It's none of it that, bananas with people flipping around. And I think we all know that too, right? People are like, okay, a lot of those movies are Matrix-like. You're like, yes, it's definitely sensationalized for the fun of martial arts. But there's a lot of actions in there where you're like, oh, that's some pretty good Wing Chun in there. Like, Donnie's showing off, like, the choreographers and everybody. They're like, we got to get in this action because it's a nice one, So there's just a myriad of things that I did before involving myself in writing these books, as people will be able to hopefully see behind me. These are the first three of the series.
Okay, so we're going to go into the series right now. So explain about Diamond Dragons and how you got started with it.
Sure. Well, I guess the best way to say it is, instead of me, again, going on a laborious thing about, Diamond Dragon, because people can visit the website, which again is just diamond-dragons.com. But I don't want to say I always wanted to write a serious and compelling sort of series and like storytelling about dragons. But there came a point where I was like, man, we've seen stories where dragons exist. They are one big, here comes, again, Lord of the Rings, Smaug, and Dragonheart. We've seen these things. We've seen just probably lots of different stories where it's usually like one or two dragons or something. B, they're usually enemies of everyone, essentially everything but dragons themselves in most cases. And C, they're usually like not the main characters, and the story does not evolve around them or revolve around them, and so on and so forth. So over these decades, not only played a whole bunch of video games that were inspiring to me, but you watch movies, you read stories and books, and so on and so forth. But it, just finally came to a head for me. I went, I want to try tackling this, and I'm going to see. I'll spend a month or so writing a few things, and if I'm like, what the hell, this is awful, I don't like it at all, and it's terrible. The story, I don't like what I'm doing with the character arcs. I don't like what I'm doing with the dramatic structure. I don't like any of it. Then I would have quit, and said that's enough of that. I don't think I can make a competent, story with dragons. But as it turns out, I think all the training paid off by paying attention to the lessons of folks like Joseph Campbell. And for people who are listening or watching who are not familiar who Joseph Campbell is, basically he's the kind of guy who inspired almost all the heroes' journeys out there. He was a big inspiration to George Lucas for creating the Star Wars series. And almost all of the kind of most famous franchises are in a way loosely, skeletally structured like what Joseph Campbell would teach about in this hero's journey. Star Wars is structured around this. Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, The Matrix. They all have these characteristics and similarities, not only with their characters, but the whole like storytelling, plot work, and you can call them dramatic beats, if you will, that are all there. And so I kind of worked on it, and after crafting the screenplay version is what I started with of Diamond Dragons 1. At this point it was just Diamond Dragons. I'd always had intentions of making more, but I was like, wow, this came out good. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. Then the pandemic hit, and I'll kind of fast forward through that. And that's when I decided, okay, I'm not just going to stick with the screenplay thing and getting a little bit of concept artwork involved. I will transition into trying to do an actual book, which I found to be, I knew it was going to be ludicrously more difficult and more involved.
Mhm.
Ironically, people in the beginning were encouraging me, oh, why are you starting with a screenplay? And I'm like, here it comes. They're like, you should do a book. That's what everybody does first. And I'm like, do you have any idea how difficult it is to do a
Mhm.
book by comparison and in comparison to
Yeah.
a screenplay? And here's the problem: is a lot of the people who are making suggestions, I'm like, you've never done any of this stuff before, so don't try to tell me what the hell I'm doing. It
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. I know that feeling.
Right. So in any case, I mean, at least I can at least add this to say is drafting a screenplay, even a competent one, not even necessarily an amateur one, a competent screenplay, not even counting the what we call the kind of shooting script. I won't get involved in that, but like the spec script or just the basic, like I just want to tell the story. A screenplay is marketably, demonstrably different and easier than making a book. A book is like a full beast, flesh and bone and heart and liver and sinew, whatever you want to call it. Screenplay is basically a nice skeleton. And it kind of makes sense, if you're making a film, it's a 2 hour experience and that's it. I mean, yeah, maybe three, but the point being is, right? You're not going to make a screenplay that if you were to flesh it all out, you'd be like, well, I think that's about 8 hours of content. Nobody's going to do that. Nobody's going to watch your 8 hour movie.
Yeah.
That way you have to say, I'm going to make 4 movies or whatever the hell.
Mm.
So that's essentially how it works for me is basically the screenplay versions. It's like the book is like one story and then, two is the second one and all that jazz. So I hope that helps clear some things up. But people really, they would benefit a lot by just visiting the website and then they start to see how far the rabbit hole goes with this. It's like, I mean, this is not just one basic story. These are all like epic fantasies, all in the vein of, again, Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings or Star Wars. Name your Alita Battle Angel, whatever, name your favorite hero's journey series, whatever, Ender's Game, whatever.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, all right. So, and you come out with, based on the website that I peeked out, it says that you come out with a new episode or a new book every solstice. So, like, you had one for the winter, and then you'll have one for spring, and then
For summer, but yeah, that's correct.
yeah,
So, right, essentially, we have here on Earth and whatnot, we name the solstices, and it's kind of cool. It's basically every half year,
yeah,
and right, it has to do with the sun and the moons and all that. And obviously, I don't need to go in all of it. If people already know, great, and if they don't, they can be like, "Yeah, I always wondered what exactly is a bloody solstice, and what the hell's an equinox?"
yeah,
They might have heard of it, but maybe they don't know.
yeah,
Now, why do I do this? There's several reasons. One, it kind of sticks me to deadlines pretty
yeah,
hard, right?
yeah,
I can't move them. I mean, and I like that. I'm also very big on that, setting deadlines and goals and then hitting them and also making them reasonable enough so that you can reach them, but also challenging enough so you're not just like, well, I guess I'll write my book. And like, how long have you been doing it? Oh, 7 years. And you're like, 7 years for one. What the hell, man? Like,
yeah,
I mean, come on, unless you're Stephen King. And I mean,
yeah,
arguably Stephen King is like, doling them out quickly.
yeah,
But anyway, back to the solstices. The point is, in addition to those setting great deadlines,
mhm,
there are celestial events throughout the storytelling of Diamond Dragons,
mhm,
all of the books, by the way, not just the one, where
yeah,
these celestial events trigger or signify something interesting. So they have eclipses,
mhm,
equinoxes, solstices, and bizarre celestial events that are obviously different from what we would have on Earth because that's not where they are. They are in a completely different planet, uh,
mhm,
probably in a different, well, not probably, but definitely in a different solar system, probably in a different universe and all
yeah,
this stuff. So, those factor in. And I found it to be like, hey, can I do it where in about 6 months' time I complete one book? And the answer was, well, yeah. And arguably, I could also brush up everything for the winter solstice. So like basically I'd write from January right up until, well, not up until June, but you kind of get the idea. I have to kind of
Mhm.
summarize it here. Release a digital version. And then even if I'm like, oh, there was a tiny mistake over there, or I could have reworded that one thing. And what about that one image? I need to tweak it a little. That could all be for the winter solstice.
Right.
But I try to make sure that the books are completed by the summer solstice, just not only for my own releases, but for my own, you know, pace and whatnot. I feel like, if I were going to take 2 or 3 years to write one book, that's a little much. I mean, do you really need that? I mean, come on, I suppose, I mean, again, everybody's going to be different. I don't want to call anybody out there if they're like, hey, I've been writing my book for 6 years. If someone else is doing, for example, full-time
Yeah.
chemistry, they're in a lab and they're like, yo, my 8 to 5, I'm like with beakers, and I mean, like, it's crazy. And I
Yeah.
have tiny bits of time, Matthew, to write my own book. I'm like, I would understand that, they're saying, yeah, I barely get 2 hours of work done on my book every week. And for me, I'm working pretty often, 9 to 3 at least, sometimes 9 to 6, whatever,
Yeah. Okay. Um, I came across something before this interview, and I'm going to state it. So you might not. Please don't shoot the messenger on it.
Shoot the messenger.
Yeah. I came across a website. I didn't even know about this until I was at work, because I work at Amazon part time.
Mhm.
And my supervisor, I mentioned that you were coming on the podcast. And so she went on this website called Goodreads
Mhm.
and read me the review.
Mhm.
And there were 2 reviews.
I think I've heard of these kinds of things before. And I
Yeah.
mean, I just encourage people to look at the website so
Yeah.
they can find out like what's going on
Oh,
with the
okay.
storytelling.
Well, that's
Another thing
why.
to mention about my series and whatnot is people can go on the website
Mhm.
and read the first 9 chapters for
Yeah.
free
Right.
on Diamond Dragons. Plus, there's also about I want to say it's like a dozen videos or so, uh, like of chapter artwork teasers.
Right.
Um, Kind of these video productions where they're like, when you see like a teaser for a film, and
Mhm.
it's all like
Yeah.
dramatic and you've got
Yeah.
something going on. There's, of course, one for each of the books. Well, thus far, I mean, obviously, I'll do them for, Diamond Dragons 5 and 6 and whatnot. But
Yeah.
and I just released the book four's teaser,
Yeah.
which shows what Armageddon's Ballad, or
Okay.
Armageddon's Ballad, if you will, is all
Yeah.
about. And it's exceptionally dramatic. I brought aboard a whole bunch of vocal artists who I'm proud to say I've been working with them for years. They're a lot of fun, really great people.
Okay.
And people can learn more about these guys and like all the artists that I've been working with. There's even original music,
Mhm.
usually in all of the different videos that I do. I've again proud to say I've hired some composers
Yeah.
to do different pieces of music, and then in
Uh,
some cases I've just licensed certain pieces of music where I was like, whoa, this is a beautiful piece of music, fits so perfectly
right.
for video X, video Y, video Z. So
Yeah.
then I contact them and license it. But like thus far, super proud to have worked with Eamon Seplow, who's my kind of first composer. I'm
Yeah.
also working with a guy named Luke Jansen, who's made. I don't know if there's any of your fans or people who are watching out there are fans of Fantasy Star 2 or just the whole Fantasy Star series of games. But Luke Jansen made this beautiful medley of Fantasy Star 2's music, which is
Mhm.
just exemplary music. And
Mhm.
so I was so taken by it. I was like, "Oh my god, I can't believe I found this. What the hell? This is an amazing homage to the
Mhm.
original music." I forget the original composer's name. I'm afraid to say, but
Right.
he's done many different games before, or was it a she? I don't remember. But either way, Fantasy Star 2's original composer, brilliant work. And so Luke sort of lifted it out of that kind of 8-bit era music and
Yeah.
did this beautiful medley of the entire score, which is like, this is not a small piece of music. It's like 30 minutes of music straight.
Right.
So when I contacted him, I said, Luke, this is brilliant. Hey, I know you're probably busy and you got all this stuff. Would you ever consider, hey, I'd like to maybe hire you to do something, and just let me know. I'm in no rush. There's no reason, just whatever. And then, he responded and he's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be great. Like, you're really cool. And I'm trying to see if I can get to work with this one dude named David Chappelle, not the comedian, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah, not the comedian, right? That would be so funny. I'm
Yeah.
Rick James.
Yeah.
Yeah, not that Dave Chappelle, but
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
David Chappelle. I want to say, is he from Australia? I don't remember, but he made some brilliant music, which I hope to maybe use one day, but I would only want to use it with his permission. So I'm like waiting, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh, David, I'd like to have you craft something, but it's rightly expensive, if that makes sense. And I don't want to make it sound weird like that. It's like, it's not like, hey, $100, hey, $500. It's a pretty penny to try
Right.
to do that, and rightly so. I think the work is that exemplary. But I don't have a lot of money,
Yeah.
but I do try to support all these different artists that I have out there, including the illustrations, most of which I do myself,
Right.
but I try to bring aboard other people. For example, this gal, Josephine Albers, I had her do, shout outs to her if she sees this video. Hi, Josephine. But I had her do several of the faces of different characters, or I should really say like the profile of, not all of them, but like just off the top of my head, she did Gargeagle, which is a weird character name, but he is very gargoyle-like. So he's kind of quirky, sort of like the scientist of the group of dragons, or not even really that. He's the mix master. He's like always mixing drinks and doing crazy stuff, and they're like, "What the hell's wrong with you, man? What are you doing?" And he's always blowing himself up at the kitchen and shit. It's pretty funny. But anyway, so I had her draw Gargeagle. I had her do Elliot, who is a green dragon. He's an emerald kind of, guy, more poison and acid dragon. But the irony is that he is green also, in the sense that he's very innocent. He's really kind of, not Magoo is the right word, but like, he represents your typical bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, excited kiddo, and he just doesn't know much about the world until tragedy strikes and all that stuff. But anyway, I mean, I could go on and on, because then recently I had Josephine do 2 other drawings that I only wish I could have gotten in Diamond Dragons 1, but those characters are not around anymore. But yes, Starsha and Siren, these were the Sea Sisters, these serpents of the sea, but they were like these very, you can think of them like very beautiful and crystalline like dragons, and their powers and their strengths were mystical, mental, and not totally spiritual, but more like healing and of the mind. So they're like kind of the esoteric dragons. So when the story goes to meet them under the ocean, it becomes very majestic and mystical, and like, whoa, that's so cool. An underwater city of dragons. How cool is that? And this is going on simultaneously as, the main story follows the above ground dragons, if you will. Tons of names that I could put in there, but one of which, real quick, Legimoto is the first dragon you meet in Diamond Dragons 1. And this name might be familiar to some people in a certain way. They'd be like, that sounds an awful lot like Leiji Matsumoto, who I'm afraid to say died in 2023. But Leiji Matsumoto is none other than essentially revered as the great grandfather, really, at this point, of anime. And people can see statues of his work in Japan all over the place. For example, some people might be familiar with Yamato, which was also known as Star Blazers here in United States. But he also did Galaxy 999 and Captain Harlock, of all things. And I mean, he did other projects as well, but it just goes to show you I'm trying to place all these cool homages in there, not only to like, anime, but there's film homages. I make some Lord of the Rings jokes in there that you can catch them if they're reading. You'll be like, wait a minute, this looks particularly like something from either Peter Jackson's, renditions of them, or like straight from Tolkien's words or whatnot. So there's a lot of details, involved. And again, a lot of this is all on the website. I think people, after a while, they'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm tired of hearing talk about it. Let me just go see and
Yeah.
feel and experience what is this about, and they can find out for themselves if they're like, uh, I like what I see here. This looks incredible. Or it's not so much for me. I'm not really interested in a story where all the characters, or essentially all the characters, are dragons. Because again, uh, there's not many humans involved in these stories to a point. I mean, I don't want to ruin anything for anybody, but yeah, it's like, when you first are introduced to the storytelling, you realize this revolves almost entirely around dragons, the villains as well. Nitrozite is the primary villain you meet in Diamond Dragons 1, and he's like a bone and ghost dragon, so you might think of him like Skeletor meets Megatron
Oh
meets,
God.
I don't know, you know.
Yeah. Okay. So the website is diamond-dragons.com, and you have written 3 so far, and number
Well,
4.
actually, at this point, sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah.
actually, at this point, it's 4. I know they have all 3 covers in the back there, but I don't think I updated StreamYard
Yeah.
recently because I just released book 4,
Okay.
at least the print versions, over the winter solstice. And as of this moment, this is only early January of
Yeah.
2025. So I literally just released Diamond Dragons 4 on
Okay.
December 21st, which again was the winter solstice.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. If you're interested in getting to know uh, about Diamond Dragons, go to diamond-dragons.com. And so the 4th book has just been released as of 3 weeks ago, December 21st, he said. And as well. And also, do you see these books possibly going towards Hollywood?
What, Hollywood?
Yeah.
I don't. This is an interesting question. I'm not exactly sure what you mean by it, but I mean Hollywood has nothing to do with any of this. I mean, the reason I'm doing my work is to um, not only celebrate storytelling in the way that I have learned it over all these years, because again,
Mhm.
I went to school for all this stuff too. Like
Yeah.
not only all throughout high school, but all throughout college.
Mhm.
Uh, my entire focus was around you know, directing and acting and sound design and
Right.
to a point later on, video editing and graphics and design work.
Mhm.
Like just for example, like to me, color palettes are really important in
Right.
the storytelling. I think there are things that people don't often recognize or realize. Like there's a reason why certain color designs are used throughout the process of storytelling. Like for example, I was just talking to someone about this on a forum
Yeah.
because I brought up color palettes and people were saying, what the hell does that have to do with anything? And I said, well, did you ever notice how we tend to pair up violets and bright reds with royalty? I'm like, this is by no accident. It's kind of how it was way back in the day because getting violet and red pigments back in the day was actually pretty difficult and expensive.
Yeah.
So therefore, it's just one of those, QED things is that like the royalty tended to, if they were wearing clothes, it wasn't that they were always doing it, but if anyone was going to have violet and red going on and bright, beautiful, those kind of colors, even to some extent, some really vibrant blues, it was going to be the royalty.
Yeah.
And so that carried on throughout storytelling in a lot of different ways. So I've kind of done that with the characters who are supposed to be a little bit more high up. As it turns out, some of them are more in violets and purples and this kind of thing. And then, there's other colors that obviously come into play, and they all have different meanings for different stories. But for example, really quick, to make like an homage or not, but a comparison, I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with Denis Villeneuve. I don't know if I say it right because I think it's a French name, but he's most well known for doing Dune right now, right? I'm sure you're familiar and right. But before that, he did Blade Runner 2049. I mean, amidst other films, so obviously he's got a history to what he's done. But I was particularly impressed with Blade Runner 2049's color palettes,
Okay.
and there's some beautifully done video essays or analyses on Denis Villeneuve's work on BR 2049. It was a brilliant film. If anybody's watching or listening right now and they haven't seen Blade Runner 2049, which is a Ryan Gosling, excuse me, and then God, who played Princess Buttercup back in the Princess Bride? It was Robin Wright.
Yeah.
Robin Wright then is in it, and of course Harrison Ford is there. I'm trying to think of some of the other stars. Oh yeah, and then I forget the gal's name off the top of my head. She was just in a Bond film, and everybody loves her. She's fantastic. I forget her name, but she was brilliant as the kind of holographic girlfriend that ends up coming involved in the BR 2049 thing. It's so crazy. The whole film is just insane. But the color palettes he did were just beautiful, and they were necessary part of the subtext, sort of things you don't see under the storytelling. You know. So, I mean, I don't know anything about Hollywood necessarily, but my goal, Joey, is to keep hitting the storytelling on all the different levels that I like to do it.
Right.
Music, as it turns out, even though you can't read it out of the pages,
Yeah.
I'm, of course, implementing brand new music into it. Some of it of my own, thinking. I'm the one who kind of designed the Diamond Dragons theme, which
Yeah.
is sort of just a 12 bar kind of, chord structure. I won't get involved in telling everybody about that, but so music is important. The illustrations have all these hidden secrets in them, and I know that's like, what does that mean? People would have to find out once they read a few of the books. They'll be like, "Whoa, this is so cool! I can't believe this has been here under my nose the whole time. I didn't see it." And
Yeah.
like, right? This was by design. I didn't want you to notice these things, and then only later you go back to the page and you might be like, "Wait, that was not always there. That was not always there." And it's like,
Yeah.
wait, I'm holding a physical book. What? So I'm not
Yeah.
cheating. There are things in the images that you would not notice until later. Then once you see them, you cannot unsee them. You know?
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, Joey, like, I don't think everybody needs to have been in, Hollywood. It's great to be Harrison Ford or
Mhm.
Gwyneth Paltrow
Yeah.
or RDJ or just any Chris Evans. I mean, it must be great to be all those wonderfully talented folks. But there are people outside of Hollywood that also have equivalent skill sets.
Uh-huh.
But there's only room for so many. You can't have a million, people in the
Okay. All right. So, yeah, because what I was aiming, the question was more aimed was seeing these books being like Dune into the movies.
Oh,
And
right, into films.
yeah,
So, well, what people can find out on the website is, I originally began with a screenplay version of Diamond Dragons. I wrote it with all the intentions that it would almost always be a visual experience, but I didn't write it in the sense that I'm like, okay, I can't wait for this to happen. Like, I don't want to burst anybody's bubble out there, or I wonder how people think about these things. But you don't simply write a screenplay and then it just magically becomes a film.
right.
And by the way, that goes even if someone said, well, can't we just do everything in 3D and do it in for example, the Unreal or Unity engines, which are beautiful engines. They've grown over the decades. I've watched them grow over the decades from, the original Unreal game, just a
Yeah.
single player game in this engine, which it just was, one-upping things like Dark Forces and Jedi Knight games. And then suddenly we had Quake,
Yeah.
coming from wonderful id Software with Romero and a Carmack, But anyway, so it's more than just that. I mean, what goes into filmmaking, people don't understand, I think, unless they're even a small part of the business. I mean, there's production schedules, there's hundreds and hundreds of people involved, there's editors and designers and like people who are running the numbers, the budget to find out, is
Yeah.
this feasible? And beyond all of that, even if you could set up, hey, we got everybody and we have the money, then
Yeah.
it's like you got to do it. Like, you got to get this stuff done. Now, how is it going to get done? And if someone's saying, I don't know, I'm like, well, then it's not, you know? So yeah, I think those are huge hurdles.
Okay.
Like, The only way that would ever happen, Joey, would be if someone legitimate, not some
Yeah.
phony baloney,
Yeah.
called up and said, "Look, we've been looking into this for, almost as long as you've been doing it. Like
Yeah.
I've been looking at you since 2021, and I'm watching these books, and I read them all, and da 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 da. And I want to do a film of this stuff, and I've got the money and the crews and the connections and the corporate cronies or whatever you want to call it
Yeah.
to pick it up." And then I'd say, "Okay, well, hold on a second." Then we'd have to talk. That would be a lawyer thing, by the way, too, right?
Yeah.
There'd be contracts left, right, up, and down, and this wouldn't just be to be stupid about it. It would be like, well, yeah, everybody needs an agreement. If you're
Yeah.
going to get an actor aboard, and let's say it's someone who's pretty professional, you want to pay them correctly. You want to say, "I'm going to take care of you." Like, I don't want you wasting 3 years of your life on a project that's not going to go anywhere, and they're not going to be aboard that kind of project either. And I wouldn't want them to be. Like, that's a thing. I would say, "Look, if we're doing this, we going all the way. It's none of this. It's none of this. Like, well, maybe we might kind of." Like, no, that's not how it works. That's not how I do my books either. That's why I say I do my stuff on every solstice. Boom. Every time I say, "Hey, I'm going to get this stuff done," guess what? History shows so far over these past 4 years that when I was like, "I'm going to release this on the summer solstice," I did. Then I did it again and again and again. So that means I met 8 deadlines thus far, major ones, by the way, not including the ones where I release all my videos and all that stuff. But yeah, it would be exciting, Joey, to have these morph towards films, but it would take a hell of a lot more people than just me.
Yeah.
And seeing as right now, I'm essentially a one-man show. And again, when I say one man, yes, I've brought aboard a few folks to do a few drawings, like I said. But for anybody, if they were to say, "Oh, well, so is this like a partnership of 6 people?" I'd be like, it's none of it like that. Like, no one has contributed more to making everything that I've done than me. It's like 90% or more of the work is, I mean, it's more like 96%, I guess. But why would you break it down like that? I would love to actually have a team, but there's no way I could say, "Yeah, I'll pay $100,000 to you, you get $100,000, and you get a car, and you." Like, what do I look like to you, Joey? I look like Mr. Money. You? What are you doing?
Yeah, Mr. Oprah.
Well, right? Or if I was, who's the head of Disney again? It's Bob Iger.
Yeah.
Right. Like, do I look like that? I'm not Warren Buffett, or I'm not even Arnold Schwarzenegger. I can't do you want me to be a dragon in your movie? Then you get to pay me. Damn it! I mean, yeah. Actually, I mean, I'm almost being, no, I'm only being semi-ironic. Arnold would make a good one of these characters. There's 2 in particular, probably Titan or Isochronius.
Okay.
They're basically like superhero, big buff, that like they're the epitome of like dragons.
Oh, wait a minute. I can give you a slight idea in reference to a superhero.
Well, there's a whole bunch of them.
Yeah. Well, I have one in particular that just give me a moment.
You don't remember?
No, I do. No, I had to pull up the file to it.
I'm joking.
I know. So,
is this real quick? Is this a character you created, or is it one? No, you're like it's out there and it's
out there.
Okay, so this is. Do you know who designed it? Like, who's the original designer of the character? Because then we can.
Actually.
Ashley.
No, actually.
Oh, I was like, Ashley.
Yeah. Actually, this person is real.
Well, I hope they're real. Not an hope. By the way, this is a good time for me to say, not an A. I don't put any AI content. What was that? Was that your superhero? Or?
Yeah. That was. Yeah. Give me a minute. Let me bring it back.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
Oh, it almost looks like Wonder Woman style. Or
yes. This is American Fox, and she is our podcast #1 fan and #1 supporter.
Oh, well, that's cool. So shout outs to American Fox. So hello from Matthew and Diamond Dragons.
Yeah. So she would usually send questions. Unfortunately, She didn't do it this time around, but would you incorporate someone like her into the Diamond Dragons?
It's possible. I don't know if it's plausible, depending on a whole bunch of different factors. Because just to let you know and your viewers as well, as I actually kind of I I'll do a quote from my first book, which is the first few passages that you read. The first few lines is, "Before I start, I must see my end. Destination known, my mind's journey now begins." So what do I mean by that? Not only is it pertinent to the storytelling, but that's actually how I do things. I pretty much always plan out, not absolutely everything, but most of the dramatic structure of one of my books, if not the other books in the series, well ahead of time before I start tackling them and moving down the road. So there's a lot of characters that, although you haven't read about them, obviously, but even if you had read all 4 of my books thus far, magically, if you could just snap your fingers and be like, I know everything about every character and every story and every location. There's more that I've been working on pretty much ever since 2021. But that said, this friend of yours, American Fox, she might find some of the characters to be very inspiring. For example, I might as well bring it up, but I don't want to overbore your readers because they'd have to go find out about this. And this might sound like, how do I understand what he's saying? A lot of the female characters that I have in there are friggin' strong and awesome. Starsha and Siren are great examples because they are these oceanic kind of, not just, they're warriors in their own right, but they're so intelligent. They're like some of the more intelligent and sort of mystical dragons of all the groups out there. And they're mostly mysterious, especially in the first book. You don't find out a lot about the oceanic dragons. There's a reason for this. Then in book 2, more of the oceanic dragons sort of get revealed, like more information is coming out of it, but they're not part of the first story as much as other ones are in that story. Then you meet another character who her name is Phaedra. So Phaedra is sort of like what's a good way of saying it? She's not like a cowgirl, but she is like a dual crossbow wielding dragon who lives in the forest on her own, and she's isolated herself on purpose so that no harm can come to her. She also has her own sort of familiar, if you will, like it's kind of like a, not quite a magical steed, but sort of a horse of some sorts. And she just ends up being a very awesome and very spiritual character, but she's tough as nails. And people at first go like, what the hell does she have crossbows for? What does she need those for? And you learn over time of like her thought process and style of being a warrior, and how she works and whatnot. But there's just a whole bunch of them. There's even just some crazy villains in there. Vedomania, is an evil character, like an evil black dragon, and you can think of her sort of like a, not quite an evil witch, so to speak, but she is more like a, not like I don't want to make a shout out to Famke Janssen, but she's kind of like a Xenia Onatopp from GoldenEye or whatnot. She's just evil to the core, and she loves it. And that's obviously that makes for a terrible character in the sense that nobody would like her, but of course you go like, oh my god, this villain, I hate her, but she's really cool. So it's like there's all sorts of those things going on in the storytelling. So you never know, your friend might find after reading all of this, be like, oh, I'm so excited about this character, that one. But yeah, there's a lot of characters coming. I can't wait to reveal Anna from for Diamond Dragons 5, and I won't say anything more about that since it's a year off or whatever, half a year off.
All right, so you can check out Diamond Dragons, like I said, on the Diamond Dragons website, which is diamond-dragons.com. Book 4 is out of the series, and hopefully in the future that Matthew decides to put a superhero type dragon, or even a human coinciding with a dragon.
Well, they're all superheroes to some extent. You can think of them almost like martial arts style superheroes, almost akin to, of all things, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which was
Okay.
directed by Ang Lee. It's
Yeah.
starring Michelle Yao and
Yep.
Chow Yun Fat and Zhong Zi.
Yeah.
Way back in the day. I want to say it was 1999.
Yeah,
Something like that.
I've heard the movie. I just never saw it. So.
Oh, I'm just saying it for
Yeah.
people who might be watching and they'd be like, "What the hell is Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon?" Like, because
Yeah.
it's old enough. It's, people don't think it's 24 years old at the very
Yeah.
least.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, they are somewhat like that. But again, since they're dragons, you have to imagine they're using their wings to like swat you. They
Yeah.
could turn completely 180 and whip you with their tail like a
Yeah.
mace on a chain, like a morning star. And of course, if they were to like forward flip into you, that's like taking that tail and going whoop, right
Yeah.
onto your head. So there's all sorts of stuff. And then obviously some of the dragons spit
Mhm.
fire, ice, electricity, poison,
Mhm.
whatever.
Yeah.
Who knows? I'm not saying who knows, like I don't, but the
Yeah.
point is it's more than just like, oh, so all your dragons, breathe fire. Well, first of all, they don't breathe fire. I suppose that would, fry them all together, but they
Yeah.
do spit this gaseous stuff out, and it can ignite if they're a fire dragon. If they're, spitting ice, that's another thing, or just whatever. But some of the characters do not possess any we'll call them breath powers, if you will,
Yeah.
shooting gas or whatever.
Yeah.
In fact, the primary hero that you meet in Diamond Dragons 1, the young hero, if you will, his name is Jackie, or Jack Ralvian for his long name. But Jackie doesn't have those kind of powers. In fact, in the beginning, he and everybody else are kind of like, when are you going to grow up into something to, like, when are you going to do something, man? And we do this on purpose. We kind of make him a nobody and sort of like not a loser in the beginning, but you kind of feel like, yeah, he's a question mark.
Yeah.
You go like, what's going to happen with him? He is sort of the farm boy nobody, Luke, like Frodo, who's still kind of just a farm boy. Harry isn't exactly a farm boy, but of course he's living in his grandma's basement or something like that. It's not doing very much. And so we kind of catapult into that. And I mean, I guess this isn't too much of a spoiler, and it really depends on who's watching and who's read what or whatever. But by 2, Jack Ralvian starts to create his own weapon. And I won't say more than that, but because he doesn't have a ranged weapon, if you will, he starts thinking about it and he's like, well, what if I make one, like, like I get it. Like I can't shoot fire and ice or whatever and stuff. And I have my own advantages in melee combat, but okay, like what if I make a damn weapon myself? You know what I mean? And so then this suddenly happens. And then in 2, he shows like sort of his inspirational knight friend of his, whose name is Duprier, actually. But anyways, Duprier is like this, he kind of fancies himself this paladin, and he even wears armor and carries a sword. It's a long story, but anyways, he's been teaching them all. And then Jackie's like, hey, I want to show you something now that he's gotten older. And he's like, yeah, I want to see this. Fires the weapon, and Duprier's like, damn, like he doesn't but he's like, holy cow, like you really did this. This is incredible. Like, are you a good witch or a bad witch? No.
Yeah.
But
like,
anyway,
like it's pretty cool, wicked.
Yeah, like, and in a way, I did this not just by design because I like storytelling, but I'm like, it is a little akin to the Jedi building his own lightsaber to an extent. Obviously, completely different. It is not a lightsaber, but the point being is that it is a new weapon and that it gives Jackie now a new advantage that he did not have before, not only over, in a way, his allies, not that he needs it, but over against his opponents, he becomes monstrously dangerous to them. Like you're like, watch out, Jackie's throwing his da 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 da.
Yeah.
Again, I don't want to ruin it too much further, but like, people can find out, they can read it if they want to, and it is something that you would have to commit to. It's not, they're not short reads. It's not like, 10,000 words, 30,000 words. It's like, these are epic fantasy stories.
Yeah.
They're akin on the level of Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter. I've already mentioned these things, but like the Harry Potter books are not very short, which is funny too, because for the age range, like I'm aiming at 12 and up, probably. I mean, at the minimum, I don't think most 12-year-olds could probably read this. A lot of adults, they would be daunted by it unless they were intelligent enough to say, hey, I'm willing to pick up the dictionary every now and again because he's used a word that I don't know.
Yeah.
But like, for example, I used the word dodecahedron, and I don't want to say I got tons of emails about it, but I did get like 3 to 6 emails going like, you invented this new word and you didn't explain it and everything. I'm like, well, wait, first of all, it's not a new word. And second of all, I did explain what it is. And third of all, it's not that difficult of a word. Dodeca meaning 2 and 10 meaning 12, hedron meaning faces. It's a 12-faced object. Dodecahedron. It's not that hard.
Yeah.
And it is
Verb, yeah.
it's important to the storytelling
Yeah.
because it has to do with an amulet that one of them is wearing, and it has 12 faces to its facets, if you will. So it's not that hard, but however, sometimes using the correct word can be daunting to some readers, but I'm sort of like, hey, learn something new. Like I use the word crenellations, which is some people say, oh, that's a big word. I'm like, well, it kind of refers to castles. And so if you're talking about castles, you might say parapet, you might say crenellations, you might say arrow slit. I mean, some people don't know what that is either, but there are words that we just don't use anymore. You don't have buildings where you're like, oh yeah, Joey, let's go on over to the crenellations. You'd be like, what the hell are you building your house?
Yeah.
All these...
Like, what the hell?
Yeah, you don't build them. And what they are, by the way, is they're just the jagged jigsaw puzzle style little diddy doodly daubers that go all the way around like a tower. And I'm not going to get into the reasoning for it, but the point is, it's not that difficult of a word, but it does apply sometimes to say, as Bob and Joey and Matthew walked, along the crenellations of the tower, Nini, Nani, Nerner, and they this and that and the other. But instead of it stopping people, and being like, well, I don't recognize that word and therefore it's no good, I'd be like, yeah, just look it up. It makes sense. Like obviously there'd be crenellations on their crystalline castle, being that these dragons live in this castle, and it's more of that kind of style. They use ballistas and catapults and all this kind of stuff, in addition to their dragon powers, if you will. I mean, there's a bunch of great sieges, when the evil dragons are sieging the castle. It's friggin' bedlam, Joey. I use this one illustration where you just all sorts of projectiles are flying all over and streams of fire and ice, and you're just like, holy like, are you crazy? I'm like, that's what's going on with them right now. Like, our castle is under siege, bro. And you're kind of like, oh wait, what if these characters die? And you're like, none of you are safe. That's how a lot of it comes in, and the villains are pretty villainous. I imagine Nitrozyte's voice to be very gravelly, right? He would be very much like a ghost, bone dragon. So it would be more that style, not like, hi, I'm Nitrozyte and I'm the evil guy for today. You'd be like, are you fucking crazy? Like that's the voice. That's going to be your voice. Hi, I'm Darth Vader. It's nice to meet you. Anyways, come on, man. Like, what the hell? And I mean, like, no shame on people like, Mike Tyson, but it's true. Like, you almost wish that there was a way to reprogram poor Mike Tyson's voice so he wouldn't be like, I'm going to mess you up, man. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to eat your children. You'd be like, dang it. He needed the voice to be like, I will kill you. I must break you. Replace Mike Tyson's voice with Dolph Lundgren's as
Doggo. Yeah, that's what I was starting to think about when you did it. I was like, yeah, that's what it sounded like.
Yeah, like wait, see if I can do it. Yeah, I must break you. Yeah. And you're just like, okay, me go home, cry now, change diaper. But I mean, that's the great thing about storytelling, right? You pick the right villains, their look, but also their voice, and so. This is an important thing to me too. I don't mean to transition to other things, but the voice acting. I mean, you can't hear through the pages, but for me to have thrown some of these voices into the videos, like I brought aboard this wonderful guy named John. What is his last name? I'd have to look it up real quick. John, what is your last name? I forget. John, I forget. But anyways, I brought him aboard to voice originally this character named Titan. And Titan, he's like a Superman dragon. And then later I also had him voice Isochronius. And Isochronius is like this armored knight, and he's like a giant. like a literal giant of a man, like a titan,
Yeah.
and you'll learn more about Isochronius because he's not even from their planet. He
Ah,
like shows up in a different. I'm not even gonna. I shouldn't ruin my own stories here
oh,
online, but you get the idea that
yeah.
there's a lot of storytelling beats going on and all sorts of crazy
Mhm.
heroes and villains, if you will. Lots of triumph and tragedy on both sides.
Mhm.
There's places where the primary villain of one essentially runs into the even worse villain of the other stories.
Right.
You're like, oh, what's going to happen now? Are they going to become friends, or how does that work? And initially, you find out. You're like, oh, so that's how it's going to go.
Mhm.
Dang,
Yeah.
that's hardcore.
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of fun storytelling in there. I think there's something for everybody. And when I say everybody, I don't mean everybody on the planet. I
Yeah.
just, if anybody's like, yo, I love fantasy,
Yeah.
I love epic storytelling, I love Lord of the Rings and the Matrix and Star Wars and Harry
Yeah.
Potter, or any combination of those level of things. And if they're like, I really enjoy dragons, or they love dragons, I mean, it's here's your sign.
Yep. All right. So it's diamond-dragons.com. Matthew, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and,
My pleasure.
explain everything. Um, so if you're into fantasy and you're into dragons and you're into space and you're into adventure, Diamond Dragons is the one that you would want to check out to leave
And it's free.
reality.
Yeah, and it's
In
free.
a different
They can download the first 9 chapters of DD1 for free, as
yeah.
it's on my website and whatnot. And beyond that, there's even an entire, I want to say it's 20 to 30 minutes long, a video that I made, which is like a very rough pre-visualization with all new music, the voiceover that I'm talking about, the narration of the screenplay, just sort of in a very rough way. But it's in a video format for people to see that I made, back in 2020.
Yeah.
And that's on my channel where people can view it. And again, it only gives a sort of peek into the whole way things are going. Very rough pre-visualization, but still at the same time, there's really no reason for people to not know whether or not they would enjoy it. Like you'd find out real quick if you'd be like, wow, this sounds really like something I'd like, or you'd be like, no, this is not for me.
Yeah. So, so definitely check out diamond-dragons.com. Matthew, again, thank you for coming on the podcast. And thank you, everyone, for watching the Life with Joey Cavill YouTube channel and podcast. God bless you all.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, Joey.
Yep.